Ontario is hopefully continuing to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. What's your party's primary focus going to be to help Ontarians to come out of COVID and move forward?
Excellent question. Well, for me, I think what the pandemic has really shown us was there was a lot of systems that were not working the way they needed to be. They were broken. And I think when the pandemic hit, we saw that. We saw how our schools started to struggle. The system did. We saw healthcare, senior care. We saw our hospitals kind of fold onto each other. And I think one of the biggest things for me that I found difficult as a school board trustee and as a parent is that I felt that, while the pandemic was new, I felt we were left on our own a lot of the time. We were left a lot on our own to decipher between the information we were being provided, what we're going to do. For parents, finding out information the last day possible. Are we going back to school or aren't we? What are we doing for childcare? Was really hard. I think for the Ontario NDP, what we want to do is we want to first do an inquiry, do some lessons learned. What happened? How did we fall so hard in some areas? And what do we need to do to build that back up and ensure the next time this happens, because there will be a next time, that we are better prepared, that we have more PPP on hand. We're going to invest in our youth, ensure that they can go to school and graduate without debt, so that they can then become part of the workforce. They can be part of the healthcare system. We're going to pay the healthcare providers properly. We're going to give the PSWs that that $5 an hour increase that they deserve. And I just think overall, it comes down to, like I was saying, the lessons learned. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we need to do better? And the one thing that I think is important, because we saw a lot of this, and we're still seeing this through the pandemic, is evictions. People are being evicted out of their homes during a pandemic. I know multiple families who, during the first and second waves, were out of their house. Nothing is open. The schools weren't open. So their kids couldn't even go to that place that was a constant building with adults supporting them. So we're going to stop that. You shouldn't be evicting people during a pandemic. That's awful. So we're going to make sure that that ends. It's not going to happen again.
And how do you plan to do that?
Well, we're going to make some changes to the way we deal with housing. So we need to fix some policies. I think for far too long, we have had people making policy decisions that don't understand the impact of what the policy is going to do to people. So you don't have a lot of people who knows what it's like to rent a home, who doesn't know what it's like to be uncertain at any given time. Is my rent going to raise? Am I going to be out on the streets? You have people making decisions who just don't understand the effects of what's going to happen when you're cutting funding to healthcare. Or when you're implementing Bill 124 that strips away a healthcare person's right to make money that they should be given. They don't understand what it means when people are working 5 jobs to provide for their families. And what it means when you are all of a sudden having to maybe let go of a job because maybe you have a car that you rely on, but gas is too expensive, so you can't get to that job anymore. So I think it comes down to electing people who generally want to understand the people that are living in their communities, who want to pull back those curtains. Let's be real. Bay of Quinte does a really good job of presenting this ideal Pleasantville image of who we are. And it is beautiful here. It's gorgeous and the people are amazing. But these curtains are drawn so tight that when people move here and they realize we have a poverty problem, they are shocked. And then they want to help. But we should get to the point where we're already helping each other beforehand.
Ontario is hopefully continuing to emerge from the COVID pandemic. What is your party's primary focus going to be to help Ontarians to come out of COVID and move forward?
Yes, absolutely. We need to focus on returning to a new normal, but recognizing that new normal will look different for everyone. We need to focus on continuing to get our vaccination levels up, but also we really now need to look to affordability. When it comes to housing, when it comes to education, the environment. There are so many things that we've learned throughout the pandemic. There are so many mistakes that have potentially been made, but there's also, I do want to celebrate a lot of successes that did occur throughout the pandemic. So the Ontario Liberal Party is going to work on those successes, repair any mistakes, make sure that the surgical backlog, make sure that our healthcare workers have the mental health supports that they need, and really just look to almost create an inventory of all the things we have, whether it be through healthcare, education, or the environment, and just make sure that any gaps that we can fill, we do. And if it's a large gap that needs more infrastructure, more funding, or more thought to it, that we make sure that anything that isn't currently in our plan becomes in our plan in that first 100 days that we take office.
Of the things you mentioned, the surgical backlog is a huge issue, and one that I find is not talked about nearly as much as it should be. It directly impacts people, and in terms of backup of things like diagnostic testing even, could have long-term impact. How high a priority is that if the Liberals are elected, and how long do you think it can take to really get it dealt with?
Yes, great question. We're looking to do it as quickly as possible. Our plan does commit $1 billion over 2 years to hopefully in that 2-year period clear the backlog, and to your point, the diagnostic backlog that did occur or was happening before the pandemic. I know so many of my friends have waited for things like ultrasounds, x-rays. Sometimes it's a very quick 6-hour turnaround, and sometimes it's a few days or a few weeks, depending on your level of access, and that certainly needs to change. So not only is the Ontario Liberal Party focused on removing that backlog through that $1 billion investment, we're also focused on giving our healthcare workers the mental health supports they need, because this backlog isn't only a financial burden, it's a health burden on our workers as well. So it's definitely a top priority.
Okay.
Ontario is hopefully continuing to emerge from the COVID pandemic. What is your party's primary focus going to be to help Ontarians come out of COVID and move forward?
COVID obviously has been a big impact on a lot of people, particularly small businesses and mental health. So the first thing that the Green Party is going to do is allocate a better part of our budget to mental health services and include mental health 100% within the OHIP. The idea is that we want to reduce the wait times. We have some children right now who are looking at 2.5 years on a wait list to get the services they need, and that's wildly inappropriate. There's going to be a lot of kids slipping through the cracks at that point. So 7% of our overall healthcare budget will be going towards mental health services. Second to that, small businesses. We had a lot of people closing their doors during the pandemic. One way that we're going to approach this is by creating more clean, green jobs, retraining 60,000 workers in green technology. That'll help Ontario move into a new green economy while giving opportunity for people to start new lives. In addition to that, I think a really cool initiative is we're going to go about a digital Main Street that'll help small businesses compete with large corporations, particularly with their online sales, and give them an opportunity to be available to Canadians.
Okay, excellent. Several possible follow-ups for that, but I think the one I'll go with, because we're going to touch on healthcare later. Really interested in the Main Street help for small businesses, and exactly. Everybody talks about helping small businesses, but how do you get the funding, and how do you direct it appropriately to get it to the people that need to get to it?
Understanding who needs help first. I think that by prioritizing creating affordable units for small businesses would be the first step. One of our platforms is increasing the amount of density within our cities and having new opportunity for affordable homes. So I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But we want to create more business environments for people to set up. At this point, rent is astronomical for individual households, but it's also beyond the scope of what a lot of businesses can afford. If you're a small business and you're looking at $1,400, $1,500, $16 just for your rent, that means that your costs are upward of $3,600, and you'll be having to make $250 a day just to make ends meet. And that's not necessarily realistic for businesses. So getting the funding to who needs it is starting with making more opportunities for businesses to open.
Ontario is hopefully now continuing to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been a long 2 years for a lot of people. So what is your party's primary focus going to be to help Ontarians come out of the COVID pandemic and move forward from here?
I think the most important thing we need to do is get businesses back up and running, get people back to work. And there's a couple of chores that need to be done in order to make that happen. We need to let our businesses and people know that the lockdowns are over and they won't be coming back. Under a new blue government, we would not go that way again. Things like vaccine passports and things like that, we would pledge not to bring those back. That's number one. Secondly is just getting the economy back into a decent shape. We've spent a ton of money over the last couple of years, the Conservative government trying to deal with all the pandemic and everything that was going on. There's been a lot of money borrowed, and that needs to be brought back in line again. Improving the economy in terms of everyday people's lives, the way we want to approach that is some reduction in taxes. So, for example, we're proposing a 3% reduction in the HST, just in order to give people a bit of a break because everything has gone a little crazy with inflation and so on. Also working hard at reducing electricity rates because those have not been reduced, even though the current government had promised they were going to make those reductions. They haven't been done. And so we have some strategies to do that. Just trying to make things more affordable for people as they come back to normal and get their lives and businesses back in order again. That's our focus.
I think we're probably going to be touching on some of those ideas a little bit later, but we have heard that there perhaps may be yet another wave coming this fall of COVID. So should that happen, is there a plan to assist Ontarians should that situation arise? Should there be another wave of COVID? What does your party and your plan to do?
I think our view is that this thing, there will be waves probably every year. This thing is endemic now. The idea of zero COVID is unfortunately not going to be real, and we're going to have to deal with COVID outbreaks probably from now on. Similar to how we deal with the flu, we will have COVID every year. Our approach to it is to concentrate more on therapeutics so that when people get sick, that we have a way to treat them. There are some therapeutics in use out there, and for whatever reason, the Ontario government has not been promoting them. We would change that. We would continue with voluntary vaccine programs to make sure that people were protected, much as we do with the flu shot every year. We're going to have to learn how to live with this virus. It's going to be here from now on in all likelihood, and we'll just learn how to deal with it, and life goes on.
For our first question, we're just going to, we're focused on a pandemic that has really gripped the country over the last 2 years in the province. Hopefully they're continuing to emerge from the pandemic. So what is your party's primary focus? What's it going to be to help Ontarians come out of COVID and move forward?
Well, first of all, make sure that we can stay open. What's primarily led all of our decision making over the last 2+ years was ensuring the health and safety of the people of Ontario and making sure that we had the health human resources available to meet those expectations. When the pandemic arrived in March 2020, we didn't know what we were dealing with. We certainly know a lot more now, given the fact that we've been dealing with it for 2+ years. But going into the last election, we knew that we needed to bolster our health human resources. We need more doctors. We need more nurses. We need more personal support workers. And the pandemic has certainly shone a light on that. So we have a plan to stay open. And that plan to stay open is to build more beds and make sure that we have more beds in our hospitals, because largely when we were making the decisions were based around hospital capacity and the ability to meet people's needs. So we've added over 3,000 beds in hospitals right across the province, including here in the Quinte region. But we're also ensuring that those beds come with the people necessary to provide the services. So 27,000 new healthcare workers are being added right now through programs like the Accelerated Personal Support Worker Program at Loyalist College and all of the other post-secondary institutions that are providing that training across the province. More nursing spaces like the standalone nursing school at Loyalist College, and there's also one at St. Lawrence College in Kingston, but at colleges right across Ontario. And then making sure that we're continuing to add medical spaces, new doctors to the region, like the expansion of the Queen's Medical School and the 50 new spaces per year that it's going to be providing for our region.
And small businesses were hit pretty hard by the pandemic, as as everyone knows. So what are some of the strategies or some of the things that you've put in place or you're going to put in place if you get reelected again to kind of help them get by and avoid them having to shut down or potentially close their doors permanently?
Yeah, the best thing we can do for small businesses is ensure that they can stay open. And that's why making sure that we have the hospital capacity and the health human resources that we need in place will allow us to ensure that those small businesses and large businesses and industries stay open. I mean, we've got a housing crisis in our province. We have to make sure that construction workers are continuing to build houses, because if we fall behind, we're going to be in even bigger trouble than we are now with our housing crisis that we're experiencing in Ontario. So let's keep our businesses open by ensuring that we have the hospital capacity and the health workers that we need to provide the services.